Welcome to We and Lewes, a podcast dedicated to celebrating the remarkable, creative, and energetic people who live in Lewes and are helping our community forge a collective soul as appealing as it is unique. These are their stories and their words. They are the We in Lewes. I'm Kevin McGinnis. Our guest today is Megan Key, the founder of 4 popular restaurants, Bramble and Brine in Lewes, and in Rehoboth, the Houston and White Company Steakhouse, the Bistro La Fable, and Delmata Italiano. By the way, I'm trained, so I say La Fable, but it seems to be La Fable here.
Yeah, it's as long as they come to dinner, I don't care what they say.
Megan was born here in Lewes, a BB baby, went to Cape High School before leaving early to attend Johnson in Wales, the much-respected culinary university in Rhode Island. Today's episode is brought to you by Coastal Lawn and Landscaping. John Gordon and his team are known as true professionals with the proven knowledge, skills, and experience to transform your yard into a garden. Today, they service more than 400 residential customers in the coastal towns of Sussex County, providing a full portfolio of landscaping services, from fertilization and irrigation to installations and hardscaping. If you want your home to look its best, use the best. Megan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Each of your restaurants is a story unto itself, a story that references your own life, family, and experience. What's the story behind Bramble and Brine?
Oh, there are many stories behind Bramble and Brine. Where should we start? Bramble and Brine was, when it first was incepted, for those who don't know, and many who do, I was married at the time. And it was a culmination of many, many dreams. I had been working my whole young adult life towards that goal in life to open my first restaurant. And in that being said, the original purpose for me getting into this business was the memories of dining with my grandparents. The first Bramble and Brine was also an antique store, so I blended in the love of the surroundings I had with my World War II era family. That was the era of my grandparents. They would be 100 now. And then also just bringing people together over food in the kinds of ways that I loved and adored as a kid. So when that disappeared, it was a rough hit to the heart. And La Fable came from those ashes. Sticking with Bramble, coming back to how it exists today, it felt right to come into my dream space in Lewes, having grown up in Lewes with my parents. The Buttery was like a big part of my world and every special celebration. So it felt very natural that all of my childhood celebrations at my grandparents' house should be reimagined with Bramble and Brine again.
There was a Pink Pony bar in Rehoboth a long time ago, I believe. Is that right?
The Pink Pony, yes. So again, playing off of the era of my grandparents, the Pony Bar washed away in the storm of '62. But I remember being a little girl and looking at all the old black and white photos that my parents had and my grandparents had of that time. And the Pink Pony pre and post was a big part of that, looking and then hearing the stories about how the Country Squire, the Pink Pony, the Seahorse, all of these dining memories for my family that I was just so engaged with hearing about. I remembered the ones that touched them. And so now as a young adult, well, I guess maybe not so young anymore, as an adult, I want to not only keep my stories alive, I also want to help preserve everyone else's in the area.
But you at one point had a horse, is that right?
I have.
Oh, you have?
I have 2.5 horses. I have a horse that I love very much. My primary horse, his name is Taco. I bought my mom a horse to ride with me. Her name is Ziggy. And I have a donkey named Burrito. So that's where the 2.5 comes from. I ride for pleasure. It's not for any other reason. And I find a lot of peace when I do get the little bit of time I have to ride.
At the current Pink Pony, there are a lot of horse equestrian awards and so on.
Yeah, those are not mine. That's a story in itself because that is one woman's equestrian career.
Really?
From a young life. It's pretty impressive. And originally I hadn't hung a lot of the blue ribbons because it didn't go with my color scheme. And then I decided to add another layer. And so if you were to walk behind the bar, almost all the ribbons on the back side of the pendant lighting are blue. So you can see that I didn't do her career quite justice when you look up it. When you go behind the bar, it's like blue, 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 blue.
When I first heard of the Houston and White Company Steakhouse, I thought it was a reference to the city of Houston, cattle, and Texas. Obviously, I was really wrong. What is the story behind that one?
Well, not to correct anyone, but I could see how, Houston, of course, Texas, but it's actually Houston White Co.
Houston, okay. So it's the New York pronunciation.
Technically, I suppose, yes. It's also the Sussex County one. Houston White was a partnership between my many great grandfather, I should just not many, and Senator Houston of Delaware. They came together in the late 1800s and formed Houston White Lumber Company. It was incorporated in 1905. My grandfather loved steak, and Mr. Emmert, actually Mr. Butch Emmert, has told me the story of him remembering serving him at the Seahorse almost every night. If not every night, but many nights of the week, he'd get his rare Delmata with peas and whipped potatoes, and actually at Bramble and Brine, we just put that on. You could choose your steak temp, but the Jacob Reese White steak platter is there. But going back to that, Houston White Co. When I took back over the original space of Bramble and Brine, it didn't feel right to keep Bramble alive. The town had already had 3 versions of it at that point, and I was thinking of how, when I opened Le Fable, it was off of the memories of my grandmother reading stories to me, specifically Eloise in Paris. And I wanted to honor my grandfather's side as well. Again, the stories of hearing the bygone eras of the lumber mill that went all the way down to Florida, all the way up to Maine. There were 2 mills. There was a mill in the Carolinas, and it was a pretty important industry at its time. Like the corporation itself were in the Library of Congress for helping to the transportation of agriculture. We had some of the original patents on the bushel barrels that you would most recently remember as being like the strawberry baskets. When they would lathe the gum tree, they could see that it was pliable, and then they started to bend the gum tree and turn it into baskets, which was transformational for agriculture in the whole country. So that also playing the food side and the history, I said, let's open Houston White Co. And as a dig to my mom specifically, she was the last sitting president of the company. I resurrected the company at the Division of Corporations, so I technically own the same company by license number. So I have one of the oldest business licenses in Delaware.
But it's not just a steak restaurant. You serve a lot more.
Oh, of course, yeah. So the steak I'm very proud of, though. I will say the beef is definitely the highlight. I worked tirelessly, since it's been open for the last 4 or 5 years, to keep increasing the level of beef that I bring to market. I flew to Chicago. I drove to Indiana. I've been to every beef source that I've purchased. They're all single source, no feed lot commodity beef. And I don't tell that story on the menu because I want people to experience it when they dine. And I have people who come in, my guests, who have dined all over the world as businessmen, businesswomen, and they are surprised to find the level of beef in Rehoboth. I'm very proud of that. No matter what happens around me, I'm only in competition with myself. So it's important that I do the best I can when I can and we all have limitations, but the one that I'm proudest of is the beef.
Le Fable, the memories of it go back to your grandmother, is that right?
Yes.
And the book Eloise in Paris?
Yeah, I have a ribbon in my hair. No one can see, but I always wear a ribbon. Eloise in Paris. My grandmother was a very colorful woman, a very elegant woman, and she fostered quite a bit of reading and writing in me. I remember being a little girl and her having me write poems in bed that she would send off to the back of like the Reader's Digest, like competitions for fun. I'm sure I think I recall somebody asking to publish one when I was like 8. And you had to pay to have it published. It was pay to play, right? But my grandmother, I think, was incredibly proud of that moment. But we would lay in bed. They lived in Henlopen Acres, and in Henlopen Acres, the lights, there's these really special street lights that look like old gas lanterns, and at a certain hour, they would go on and go off. And I remember I would be laying in bed, and my favorite memories would be listening to the rain if it was raining, my grandmother, like laying in my grandmother's arm, listening to her read and watching the lights go on or off. And that was pretty special. So Eloise in Paris specifically, I was always very drawn to France as a little girl. I remember finding French learning lesson, like speaking, lesson books in the attic from my aunt's childhood. And I would pretend to speak French. I do not speak French. I do not. But I was always very attracted to it. And so La Fable actually was created within a day, the concept, without me having ever been to Paris or France. Ever. It was just from my memories.
Now, when you create a restaurant, you have an idea, you create a restaurant, does that evolve over time? That is a collaborative effort? Or are you sitting down by yourself thinking?
It's a lot of thinking. It's a lot of development with pictures. I see words as pictures in my mind, and so it's easy for me to layer and develop. I met somebody recently, and I think it's always shocking, especially through my travels, when I meet other people in the industry outside of the area, and I can write a menu or I can put a vision board together for a concept, for a space in front of them very quickly. And if I have a super power, that's probably it, just because I become very excited about the possibilities. There's never a no. So that being said, I play a lot on the memories, as you can see, and then I layer in the inspiration with the pictures. I put together my boards. It comes together pretty quickly, but working with me is quite a challenge as we develop and bring to life, because I'm always sourcing things. I'm always online on online auctions for like antiques. I'm traveling, and just most recently I saw on the Facebook marketplace, one of my friends is giving away this beautiful, really beautiful baby grand piano with lovely lines that doesn't work anymore, which is perfect because I want to cut it apart. And I want to make it, I want to turn it into something. And the lines are so beautiful. And the only other piano I could find was like $30,000 fully restored, this exact piano. Like, I feel a little guilty that I'm not restoring it. However, it's going to be beautiful in a future project. I see it already in my head. And I texted one of my employees, my director of facilities, Rick Bowers, who's amazing. He builds me everything. I said, you need to go pick up this piano, please. And so you never know where the day is going to turn and what project's going to develop off of what I find. That's what I'm trying to say. So mid-construction, I could find something else I want to layer in. And that makes it tough. I'm not the kind of person who's going to have it fully. I like to take the longest road, not the direct shot.
Delmata Italiano, that has gone through a few versions, if you will. And I know because you opened in a very challenging time.
Yeah, that was tough. I will say the greatest challenge, other than the staffing and not being able to bring to life exactly what I want at all times because of staffing, has been that the two projects that I chose to take on during COVID. One, Delmata was not chosen during that time. I settled on the restaurant prior. That was a big moment in my career where I could buy out another restaurant. I had never done that before. I'd taken over dead spaces. So here I am, January 1st, 2020, settling on my first.
No.
Here's money for your business that I have no interest in, but I like your lease, so I'm going to take that over. That was like a pretty profound moment that I could do that. Here's all of my money. And then getting the bids for, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to actually build this one with my own two hands so much. Let me find a contractor to help me out this time. And then having a bid come in to redo the space. And I'm like, you know what? I love the gut process. I'll gut it myself. I'm literally in the restaurant, like hitting it with pots and pans, getting down the fake walls. And that was March 10th. So I have this gutted space, and then we were shut down. And not only could I not get anybody in to build it, I don't even know if I'm going to survive with my other 2 restaurants. I don't know what I'm going to do. I had a little bit of a warning of the shutdown, so I was able to prepare myself to pivot quickly at Houston to cook the meals, which we'll talk about later, I'm sure. But if I had this space that I couldn't even turn the keys into and write off what I had paid this other person because I gutted it. And now my bid is 4 times the amount because the construction prices and the labor prices have all gone up, and it's 3 times as long to bring it to life. So that was the first COVID challenge.
Wow.
Whilst trying to stay alive in the other 2. And Delmata's original version, I know there was one interview about what I was bringing to life, and I had every intention of it becoming the Italian Roman version of Fable. And I know I had said I have no interest in serving pizza in that first and only article pre-COVID. And then as we were still no longer able to open for full service restaurants by the time I was getting to the end of the construction, I said, I have to have a takeout concept. And being Megan in Megan fashion, I make the most complicated pizza of all time. So that's a whole other set of challenges of having had kept the right staff in place to make my pizza right. Delmata is literally a labor of love, like every Nona would tell you. So
all of your restaurants promise a unique dining experience based in no small part on the attention you give to everything, to the furniture, furnishings, and in one case, a parrot. How do you design your restaurants and create that right atmosphere for that particular restaurant?
Oh, the space. The space is the first. Usually, I'd say the space is the answer, and the community. I've always tried to open concepts that I felt the community would gravitate towards and need, not just build around. I have 100 different concepts in my head at any given time. So for me, it's the challenge of, okay, what do I think this building should be? Not what passion do I feel like opening right now? It's what do I want to build in this particular space? I'd say that I'm more of an interior designer than anything because I enjoy that part the best and the most. The details, the staff die when I mention the details, because having 4 now, it's tough when I see that they're being missed. But it's really Disney for me. It's like building my own Willy Wonka world each time. I find it fantastical. I find it inspiring to take something that looked one way and make it a complete new version of itself and try to make it brightly shine better than it had in the past. Or for the Buttery, for example, our memories of that space are so profound. And I promise you that most people, we only remember our last memory of the memory. That's how our brains work. And so that's a really tough bite to take on something iconic that was transformed into a tavern and then try to bring it back to the memory of your last memory a decade later. So the Buttery was really, the Bramble and Brine at the Buttery was like my memories of the Buttery on crack for the interior. And I think what makes it special is when people go, oh, well, this was here and this was here. I'm like, no, none of this was here. None of it. If it was, I would have been open a lot sooner. So.
But you do have little features that I find fascinating. When you walk in, I know you have some of the same look that was there with the Buttery, but you also have a pedestal. On the pedestal is a book, and it's a dictionary of food. Is that it? But I've looked, and I've noticed it's not ever on the same page. It's not just a fixed thing. When you come in, something's going on with the book.
So that is the Encyclopedia of Food of the USA. And I love that book is so visceral for people when they open it.
Oh, I thought you were not allowed to touch it. I thought the parrot would come out and attack you.
Right. Well, he attacks me. It's a touch and play restaurant. There's going to be more of that coming as well. But no, we do open the book to the page that we feel is most relevant to the menu that we're serving or the day. For example, brunch is always on New Orleans jazz brunch. Something that might be inspiring to me, if we're changing, say we're changing the beef for the week, we'll open up to cattle. And it drives the conversation. That was something that just it always all happens organically. I'm not a type A person at all. So it all comes from feelings and trying to grow on that human connection. And the book does connect. I'm always my own guest before I am my own boss. And I think that's important. And when I'm having the most stress in my world, it's when I realize that as my own guest, I'm not able to catch up on everything fast enough, including the details. So I control the best I can, like with salt and pepper shakers. I know that makes me happy, and it makes everyone happy. And if people take them, people take things a lot home with them as trinkets. It's not ideal, but
seriously,
it's all the time. But the salt and pepper shakers are designed for that, where I know that they slip away. And so I have a funny little source that I don't say out loud, but I know that I can replace that. Hopefully not everyone takes the salt and pepper. I'll have to have a salt and pepper charge on my checks. But the details are so important. And I think going back to Disney World, I do go to Disney World a lot to remind myself of that it is okay to have it all. And it is okay for everything to be special. I know that like a design sense is not everything should be special. That's like a rule of thumb in interior design. If everything's special, then none of it's special. I disagree with that. I'm a maximalist. Like, no, this and this and this. and I do believe that things find you. So there are a lot of items across the restaurants that one have been given to me by guests that I've stumbled upon quite serendipitously. And this particular version of Bramble and Brine specifically, nothing is for sale, but the first one, everything was for sale. And so it was an antique store that you could unplug a chandelier and take with you, and many people did. And then I had a vintage store at the time, and I would just go grab another chandelier and plug it in.
No one in professional sports would ever judge a player based on one at bat or one play or one kick. Everyone understands no one can be perfect all the time. But in your world, you can be judged on a single dinner, a single experience, one meal, one server's remark. How do you prepare for this?
Before COVID, every single day I woke up and read every single review. Let me put it that way. I wasn't the only one. There was so much at risk knowing that there's not that massive investment safety net where anybody in my world, my family, my managers, my friends, we would all wake up and read every single review as if it was the New York Times, and making sure that we weren't missing. When COVID came, I had to stop reading the reviews. I started having panic attacks. I was in the hospital because I couldn't control it. I still can't control it to a degree. You're only as good as your last meal. And that's like a big statement in our industry. We know that. However, every day is a new day, and every meal is another chance at that last meal. It may not be with the same person. So you have to, what I've learned in life is the grace for myself, for my staff, to have these teachable moments, and hope that I get to them fast enough so it doesn't become a pattern. I mean, the first year and a half of COVID, everything was just a pattern of that. I couldn't get to anything fast enough without having a stroke. But now we're coming to the other side of this, and we have a core group of people who understand and care that although we're not perfect, nobody wants you to have an imperfect experience from the front to the back. Nobody in my company is coming in and clocking out and saying, well, I only did half my best today. Good luck, everybody else. No one. We're all there trying, and we all have bad days too. And I think that's what's special. We're not, I don't want to use any particular restaurant names to offend any level of hospitality, but we're not the kind of place that you're going to work and you're going to look at it as an ATM and every person who comes in is a transaction. We're trying to truly build relationships. And when we miss, just like any relationship in life, you're not given a second chance if you mess up in certain friendships or relationships as well. And we're no different. When you're relationship building, you hope for the best and you pivot to the person who might be better for you next, for the next meal, if that's what it takes.
During the pandemic, you were providing meals not just for takeout, but you were providing a lot of meals for others. It numbered into the thousands. Is that right?
Yes. It was a really unique time to be one of the only restaurants that was cooking. So I had this unique position where my cousin was in Italy, and what we were seeing on the news here in America was not quite as transparent as what was happening around the world with the shutdowns. So I had a little bit of a warning from my beloved cousin saying, Megan, you're shutting down no matter what they say. So that was step one. Having, like I had said previously, that I live above Houston White, I closed my restaurant 3 days before we were notified of shutdown. That enabled all of my staff to get unemployment immediately. There were people who worked for other businesses that still a year and a half later didn't receive their assistance. They may have been retributed like in backwards time, however you say that. But they were struggling during the interim of waiting. Whereas my staff, I took the hit, the unemployment hit, and I said, but I don't know if I'm going to survive. You guys apply for unemployment now before the world shuts down. And nearly every single employee of mine was able to get that. So that was the first round, making sure my staff was taken care of as best as I could. I then consolidated all of Fable into Houston White. We papered up the windows at Houston and turned it into a pretty much a grocery store for the staff and for myself. I immediately called Cisco, which is not necessarily a company I work with at all actually, but Cisco, Gordon's, United, all the broadliners. Mm-hmm. And I said, please send me your closeout list. And I'm not somebody who has ever worked with a closeout list before. And for those who don't know what a closeout list is, it's the items they need to get rid of. Maybe they're in the freezer, they're older, they're getting old. And I bought $30,000 worth of closeouts. We're talking frozen hams, tubes of ground beef that have been frozen that were getting to the end of the frozen date, weird things like canned milks and canned vegetables, whatever I could get my hands on. And that I said, I just felt it in my heart. At the same time, I ordered every bottle of Everclear left in the state because I couldn't get sanitizer. That was the first week when we got shut down. I said, I'll take every bottle of Everclear. I still have it. So we infuse with it now. We make tonics and tinctures, but my staff, the new members are like, why are there cases of fifths of Everclear? I'm like, well, there was this one time. And so that set me up to be COVID safe because I now had all of my groceries. I went to Home Depot. We put up tons and tons of shelving, so it really did look like a grocery store. We moved all the chairs out, all the tables out. I had chest freezer after chest freezer after chest freezer with inventories of what were in them. And I started waking up. Within 3 days of shutdown, I was cooking. And I'd wake up every morning, and I had remembered this time in Napa, Thomas Keller's Ad Hoc, where he puts out his menu every day. And you don't know what he was going to serve you, except that you would know on certain days it'd be fried chicken day. And Ad Hoc is a very popular concept. So I said, okay, this is COVID Ad Hoc coming to you from Sussex County. I wake up, I never talked to anybody or touched anybody. I lived upstairs. I'd go downstairs and I'd say, we're making raviolis today. And as the immune compromised community, our older clientele, saw right away that they could get safe food. They didn't feel comfortable going to the grocery store, but they could come to me and the goodwill that I built in the community and get a safe meal within 3 days of lockdown. That developed a narrative. And then somehow that got turned into the institutions that were providing meals to the needy. They were like, wait, there's this one girl cooking these meals for a population that need it. and all of our sponsors have dropped. It started with an orphanage, then it went to tons of the morning breakfast homeless shelters. Then it became Easter, because we went through Mother's Day and Easter and like big pickups, and I just kept praying and saying, I'll keep cooking as long as I can. And I had this grocery store and I had my two hands, and I had one friend of mine who also didn't touch anyone and lived alone. His name's Ty Wilkerson. He named it Quarantine Cuisine. And he would come and be my porter in the kitchen, and he would deliver the food. Everyone got to know Ty because he would deliver the food to the cars. And we ended up doing thousands of charitable dinners, and people started dropping off checks in my mailbox so that I could continue to do it. It brings tears to my eyes because it was a really beautiful time. And to look back and think that just these two hands and Ty would be the mashed potato boy for like hours making a vat of mashed potatoes. He hated shepherd's pie day. And I am such a baby with getting burned. I have pictures of one hand being in milk, because milk takes away the burn, supposedly. Like, that's a very known thing in like the Latin community. When you burn yourself, you put your hand in milk. And there's me like making chocolate covered eggs for Easter with my hand in milk here, smiling with like chocolate everywhere. But that was the most special time of my entire career.
You grew up here, but you also spent a lot of time in Henlopen and Acres. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, half and half. My grandfather's side is from Delaware. My grandmother's side is from Jim Thorpe in Baltimore. And she was married first to a gentleman who came from plenty of means. He owned a pharmaceutical company, and she had this beautiful life in Roland Park. And when he passed away, she moved to their beach house in Henlopen Acres. And she was one of the first houses that had been built back there when they developed the farm.
Wasn't the theme of that development pine meets brine?
Yes, there's a postcard in the Rehoboth Museum. That's where I was reminded of that slogan. And it says, "Come visit beautiful Rehoboth Beach where the pine meets the brine." And so I, at the time, my ex-husband and I, we were doing boots on the ground. What are we going to call this restaurant? And we stumbled across this postcard, and we wrote down tons of different names. The Merrimack, all different things. Henlopen City actually was one. And now we have beautiful Henlopen City Oyster House. Those guys are amazing. And then I said, "Pine meets the brine." I said, "I love it," because it reminded me of my home, my childhood. But there's a Pine and Brine condominium. We would have called it Pine and Brine, but I didn't want people to get confused. This is really ironic. I didn't want people to confuse the location with Pine and Brine, which was a condominium beach block. I think it's on Maryland and First. I said, "But brambles are the they're blackberries, any brambly prickly bush. They're also the prickers that get on you when you walk to the beach that are very annoying. And the brine is how you brine food, but it's also the sea." So we landed there. Long story short, the whole idea to call it Bramble and Brine rather than Pine and Brine was so that people would not be confused by the location. Me being the most analog person in their 30s, you can imagine I didn't quite process or consider the online footprint of having the old Bramble and Brine become another restaurant of mine, which is Houston White Co., then becoming Bramble and Brine and Lewes, but not just Bramble and Brine at the Buttery. And the Buttery has also had 3 transformations online. So sometimes people go to Bramble and Brine on Uber and they end up at Houston White. So maybe it was cross-marketing, but it's a little bit of a mess.
When you were growing up, did you want to be a chef?
Yes. Well, sort of. When I was growing up, I wanted to be an archaeologist. And I did study anthropology at one point. But I always liked to I wanted to make clothing. I wanted to be an artist. I watched a lot of Bob Ross. I'm not great at artists, although I did just paint a tomato at the last food show, and I think mine was the best. I would sew. I don't know if you remember, like PBS would have different like teachable shows back in the era of Julia Child. I would watch Julia Child. I would watch a lot of the people I don't remember their names, but I would still be fascinated. I would cook with my nanny in the kitchen, more like make a mess, but I thought I was cooking. I love to eat. I had a speech impediment growing up, pretty bad. And part of the speech impediment came from my palate being my mouth is very small, and my teeth, nobody knew, but my teeth just hurt so much and I couldn't eat. And I didn't know that really until I started to get older and I could communicate. But I didn't eat meat for the first part of my life, for a very good bit, not because I didn't like it, I suppose, but because it hurt to eat it. So then when they discovered that I had braces at a very, very early age and teeth pulled, and I was like, I can eat all these things and everything tastes so good. And by definition, it doesn't help that I'm a super taster. So I fell in love with food from the moment that I could chew it.
You went to Cape.
Yes.
But you left early to go to Johnson and Wales. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. So I was a little defiant back then, and I was a pretty good student. I never had to try, which was a blessing. Honors, all the things, except in advanced math. And this is ironic as well. I was in my Algebra 3 class. I don't know, one of those classes you don't want to take. And I wasn't doing very well. It was like the only subject I wasn't doing great in. And I heard that Johnson & Wales was doing a demonstration. Now, this time I was class president. I was in every athletic team, probably not great, but my heart was there. Band, choir, honor society, all the events. But this one thing I couldn't quite grasp, which was this math class. And this math teacher was really doing her job right. And the demonstration fell during the class, and she said, "You are not allowed to go to that demonstration because you're not U of a C." I said, "I will show you." I left that class without permission. I went to that. I said, "You're not going to control my future." And out of defiance, I think I went to culinary school. And it's not her fault. She was a wonderful, she liked what she did just as much as I like food, and she wanted me to do better at math, and I did not care. And so I went to the demonstration, and at that time, culinary school wasn't a place for I'm putting air quotes up, normal students, and I'm by far not normal, but, it wasn't a place where kids on the honor roll would typically gravitate towards. And so they gave out 33 of these scholarships a year across the world. At that time, Johnson & Wales had like 5 campuses, one in Sweden as well. And they were called access students, and they give you a full ride. And you finish your senior year of high school and start your freshman year. So all the administration has to sign off. It's like a big process because the state essentially has to sign off on it because you become a steward of Johnson & Wales. I go and they look at all my extracurriculars and my grades, and they immediately offer me the scholarship. So I actually didn't even apply to any other colleges.
Did you leave? Didn't you leave school early?
Yeah, but that would have been the time I was looking and started vetting. I had started to look at colleges, but I didn't even apply anywhere. I took that scholarship and left.
Did this get you out of that math class?
Yes. And I was so proud to go to that teacher and say, if I hadn't gone, I wouldn't have gotten the scholarship. And she's probably the one person who didn't sign off on, I'm sure they had to go above her. But yeah, that was.
But then when you got there, then you changed, after a while, you changed majors.
Well, the irony is that you still have to take regular classes, right? And seeing my grades, the school, again, not being a place where traditional students would go, they put me not only a year ahead, but in all the honors classes there. And they have a regular, university side as well. I say regular, I mean not culinary. So you still take your maths, your sciences. It's a 4-year, institution. And they put me in honors quantitative analysis. Numbers.
Yes, so the teacher kind of got you back on the karma side of things.
I didn't even know what that language was. I said, what are statistics and quantitative analysis? What am I doing? Needless to say, I did not do well in that class. But yeah, I switched to honors international business and fashion merchandising. That was my first switch. When I went to culinary school, I thought I can work weekends, I can work holidays. I don't need children. I don't need a husband. Well, ironically, I still don't have those things. But at the time, I was like, I'm fine with dedicating my life, and I'm going to be a master chef. I told myself that. I said, I'm going to be a master chef. There were only 81 in the world at that time, I think. I think I remember that correctly. And Johnson Wales at the time had more on staff than any school in the world at that moment. And then as I started to get further in the process of it, I was like, well, maybe I do want some of these things that I've put this finite rule on my life on. And so I pulled away. Food was always easy for me. I might not be perfect, but I do cook intuitively and with my heart. And front of house is definitely natural for me because I love to serve people. I love to watch people smile. So leaving culinary school wasn't necessarily going to be the end of my world. I knew I'd probably still have a restaurant. I was never not going to have it. I just didn't know if it would be all of my world or the thing that investment bankers do. So, and they're like, hey, I think that's cool. Let's open a restaurant. I ended up trying many, many different things and always came back to the restaurant. And yet I never really thought past that moment when I started the switching if I would have a conventional white picket life with kids and the husband and the package. And that's probably, everybody looks back and they look at their choices. I have no regrets, and I don't feel like there's something missing. I just think that maybe that wasn't something that was in my mind because it wasn't my soul journey.
You also studied for a while at Harvard, right?
A short bit of time, yeah. I said to my friend, my very best friend said, what would you do if you won the lottery? I'd been to many schools. I went to nursing school. I went to photography school. I had convinced my mom, God bless her. I said, hey, I'm in this amazing quadrant of the world where there's the best colleges around me. Why can't I just learn everything? Why can't I just take a class here, a class there, and be enrolled in one, but like continually educate myself and just be a more rounded human like they did for what men were allowed to do, in Regency era, not necessarily women, but like, let me just live that Regency era gentleman life where I'm a better human and I study everything. And she said, okay.
Oh, wow.
She actually had told me at a very young age that I wasn't someone that needed a degree to be successful because I had that entrepreneurial spirit, which what a beautiful thing for a parent to say to a kid when every other parent is saying you need $300,000 of the debt to be something. So thank you, Mom. But at Harvard, my best friend had said, what would you do if we won the lottery? I said, I think I would see if I would pay my way into Harvard. That's what I said. And just see if I could hack it and see if I get that experience and I still want a restaurant, then it's restaurants. Well, goodness gracious, if it didn't happen, I said, I go to Harvard now, not necessarily conventionally in the way where I think I'm going to do anything with it. It was like a notch. And I study anthropology for a bit, and then the markets don't really recover from 2008. And I'm like, what am I going to do with this? Also, how am I going to buy a restaurant? And so hearing that question, what am I going to do with this? How am I going to buy a restaurant? Reminded me that I still wanted a restaurant many years later. And I came home, got my real estate license during the worst market of all time to save up as much money as I could to try to open a restaurant. And that's what happened.
You've had great success with your restaurants.
I've been fortunate.
But what drives you to keep pushing forward rather than just sitting back and writing out what you've already done?
Oh, I love that question. I always ask people the why. Why do you keep going? Why? I was sitting in a room with Mickey Dressler, who, I think I said his name properly, who, it was like a little round table he was a big marketing for Gap, Old Navy. Anyway, hearing his story, I asked, what is your why? Like, he's much older. Why do you keep going? And the answer wasn't quite clear. And I think a lot of people can't answer their why very clearly. For me, I recognize that my why changes every day. Not the core values of it, but why is this moment different from yesterday's moment? Well, that's because I'm a different person today than I was yesterday. I'm a different person now than I was 40 minutes ago having this talk with you. Because as you communicate with people, I think you start to realize more of yourself. And my why as to what keeps me going is because as I continue to grow and get excited by the ideas and the amount of jobs and the safety that I try to offer in my business, because I know what it feels like to not be safe in my business or in my home. I pride myself on creating a safe place that people can work. It doesn't mean I don't yell sometimes, but I will protect you with all my heart. And that's what drives me, creating these places where people come away from the world into my magical, fantastical world, while at the same time, I'm learning more about myself. Every dish I write, every person I talk to in the dining room, every staff person that I help cultivate or helps cultivate me, every single moment of my world as it grows, I grow.
Megan, thanks for joining us
Thanks
today.
for letting me go on and on.
For sharing not only what you're doing, but also who you are.
Oh, thank you.
It's not hard to imagine you having great success in another part of the country or abroad. So on behalf of many of us here in town, thanks for coming home.
Oh, thank you.
And thanks to today's sponsor, Coastal Lawn and Landscaping. Remember, they do so much more than cut grass and spread mulch. They can see what your yard could be. Talk to them. You'll be surprised. Good news. The We and Lewes baseball caps are back in stock at Shorebreak in downtown Lewes. I hope you'll pick one up and show your support. By the way, they look good on everyone, and anecdotal evidence has proven conclusively that they make most people look thinner. I don't know how. It must be the colors. Thank you for listening to today's episode, and when you can, don't forget to take a moment to enjoy our town, which some of us are lucky enough to call home. Till next time, this has been We and Lewes, the podcast.